with another episode. This is the second episode, and I think I'm going to call this one Brothers Gotta Hug. The story I'm going to reveal to you definitely fits the notion that brothers need to hug. At least these two brothers really needed to hug. So, I am headed to start in Kearney, Nebraska. And if you're driving through Kearney, Nebraska, which I'm pretty much what most people do, they just drive through. If you're on Interstate 80, you will eventually come to a place called the Archway. And the Archway talks a little bit about this incident. It sort of happened in that area, but we're actually going to go out and check out the area where this event really took place. The two people in question are the Martin brothers, and this event happened in 1860s when the white settlers and the Native American Indians were at war. So here we go. Let's go to the Arch. This place is the Great Platte River Road Archway and Memorial. And this is the part now where I'm going to do some humble bragging. And that is that I actually helped work on this place way back when I was, late 20s. I actually worked mostly in the construction in the interior of the place. And I remember distinctly when it opened, I was allowed to bring family and friends through, and that was sort of rewarding. But anyway, let's get back to the story. Okay, I am on the Interstate 80, and I am headed toward a town called Doniphan, which is south of Grand Island. This is where the incident happened with the Martin brothers. So, it is 1864, and there was a bit of a war going on between the natives and the U.S. Army, and in particular the new settlers that are coming in. So, by and large, in this area, it was the Sioux Indians and the Cheyenne. So the Sioux and the Cheyenne were up to no good. They were randomly attacking wagon trains, pretty much anybody that they felt was encroaching upon their rights. Now, the Martin brothers were farm kids. I believe they were like 15 and 12 years old. Nat and Bob. And they were working in a field, gathering up a bunch of hay and hauling it back to their farm. And they were in the process. The day was almost over, and they were headed back. And a big band of Indians came up on them and started attacking them. They got on a horse together. There's just two of them. And they took off running as fast as they could. But the Indians pursued them and fired arrows at them. Now, the boy in the back took several arrows. He took two. But what happened was that the arrow went all the way through the boy riding on the back into the one riding at the front. And so they were effectively pinned together. Obviously, when they got shot, they were in a bit of shock, and they fell off the horse. And the Indians that were pursuing them assumed that they were dead. Well, the boys weren't dead. In fact, somehow they got back up onto the horse after they were being left alone and rode back home and got to a doctor, and they were separated. Both of the boys lived after that well into adulthood. Here I am, back at home base again. This week's little excursion was a suggestion that my wife made. Apparently, the story of the two Martin brothers really stuck with her. As I'm sure it stuck with the Martin brothers. But now, one thing I want to point out, if you happen to be somebody that appreciates the tourism part of these things, there is another memorial out there, I think, that is a little bit closer to Doniphan, where they play up the story of the Martin brothers yet again. I have to say that the locals are really milking it for all it's worth, but it's a good story. But There's another spot out there that I just didn't have time to get to, and maybe some other time as I'm going by, I will take some video and throw it up there. But so I'm going to talk about using the story of the Martin Brothers in a Weird West, Wild West role-playing game or literature or writings. I have to confess that this particular journey didn't spark my imagination the way the previous one did, but I still think there's a lot of good material, and perhaps maybe it does for you, and you've come up with some better stuff just by getting a brief notion of what happened with the Martin Brothers. My first thought was to have them be dead and have them reappear as ghosts. Something that maybe perhaps would be almost just a random encounter as the heroes were traveling across the prairie, or maybe they're camped out at night and lo and behold they see a ghost of two brothers riding home with arrows sticking out of them. Now I understand that's not much of an adventure there, so I've come up with some other angles perhaps, and I'm thinking that you could use these two brothers as NPCs in your campaign, and they are cursed. And this episode happened a decade or two before, and because of the nature of the Weird West, it's supernatural. Something about the arrow is cursed, in particular the arrow that actually stuck them together. And when they got to the doctor and had the arrow removed, I'm assuming that the doctor probably just snipped the arrow in half and then extracted the arrow out that way. But I'm thinking in this particular version of the story, yeah, this happens, and there are two sections of the arrow, and of course each brother has to keep their own section to as a reminder of what happened to them and to show and prove it. But because this arrow was cut in half, the two brothers are cursed, and somehow they must bring the two halves of the arrow back together again. I'm thinking perhaps some sort of like maybe Corsican Brothers effect, where what happens to one happens to the other, and maybe these are negative things. I still have to flesh it out, obviously, and I will or I won't, depending upon where my creative journey takes me. So something I have been working on is the adventure that I'm writing based on last episode, the Robb Cemetery. It is, for the most part, written. I could run it now, in particular using the Deadlands/Savage World system. When I publish these adventures, I sort of keep it system agnostic and just use D20 stats, which are open licensed. So I can't get in trouble for using it. And then the game master would have to come up with new stats for whichever game system he's using. And I'm really thinking about perhaps publishing these adventures with various other systems statistics like Dark Trails, provided that that's allowed. And it's something I got to work on in the future. But the adventure that I am currently going to run and have written with the Robb Cemetery is going to be called That Poor Girl. Obviously, I don't want to give too much away because people who are watching this might want to be surprised and enjoy the adventure. But I went with the fact that she was somehow secretly wrapped up, and by her I mean the girl that the memorial was built for. Obviously, I changed her name. And yes, it's going to be a pun name. Or punish. I want to punish my players with my names. But she voluntarily had herself sacrificed so that she could become a vessel for an ancient Egyptian goddess. Obviously, this is a cult thing. And when the heroes show up, they're going to discover that these shenanigans are going on. They're going to discover what the girl has become. And then I'm also going to have things happen with the graveyard. So I thought maybe I could just show you a little bit of my creative process when I go to writing up and publishing an adventure. So here's what I've done so far. So to start, I simply went to Google Earth and found the real location and did a screen grab and brought it over here to manipulate it with my art program. and basically just use it as a reference point. Now I'm going to get rid of a lot of these trees because I'm sure 150 years ago there wouldn't be this many trees. So at this stage I had to draw it myself to make my map, and I mainly focused on that main sort of memorial chapel area. Tried out some various techniques to see how I wanted to draw it up with a pen. So this is where I'm at so far. I haven't had a lot of time to work on it, but this is the map that I will be able to use on Roll20, and then if I do decide to go ahead and publish it, I can really sort of pretty it up and make it worthwhile. So there it is. So I thought I would take a moment to talk about something other than Weird West gaming. I'm going to talk about Weird West literature for a little bit. Something I want to kind of do on a regular basis here is to talk about some of the books and movies and maybe comic books and other media that I find that I enjoy in this, I guess, subgenre of literature. I started thinking about what to talk about in this and realized that I really couldn't pinpoint a single book that you could say birthed the genre. So I just sort of went over to my bookshelf and looked over the books that I had read and picked one that I felt was a strong candidate for something like that. Now, obviously, this isn't something that I would put up there as the best of all, but it really did a wonderful job of sort of hitting all the little, hitting the right notes for me as a Weird Western goes. All right, so it's going to look backwards on this video, but I'm going to show you the cover anyway. And it is The Six Gun Tarot by R.S. Bilcher. I got this in paperback. I'm sure that you could get it in hardback. It's been out for quite a while. I should look and see when it was published. But so essentially, this book is set in the real world. I believe it's 1869, and it's in Nevada. And the main character is, well, if there is a main character, is a young man. By young man, I mean like around 15 years old. Named Jim, and he is attempting to cross the desert, and he ends up finally making it through in pretty bad shape, riding on his horse, and I believe the desert's called the big 40-mile stretch of desert that he had to cross to reach this town. The town is named Golgotha, and that is basically Calvary, the hill where Jesus was crucified, a different name for that hill. For those of you who probably don't understand what that is, but there is a lot of references to religious Christianity in particular, and it's used as a backdrop. There's angels, those kinds of things. A large percentage of the people in the town are Mormons, which is interesting to me. There's nothing more Western than Mormonism, I guess, in my mind. But so I've read the book and kind of reread passages since then, and it would be kind of interesting to run a campaign, a Weird West campaign out of that world. And I'm suspecting that maybe the writer did. I'm not sure, but so yeah, there's a wide range of characters, and it's kind of one of those fantasy novel setups where you have a large number of characters, so that, you know, there's always going to be at least one that any given reader is going to be able to associate with, feel for. But I mean, they also do a good job of basically making all of the characters sympathetic, which is good. So there's a lot of the stereotypes there. You know, there's a Native American guy who can shapeshift, and you've got a sheriff, and you've got the mad scientist, these kinds of things. But they're fleshed out so well that they're not a stereotype by any stretch. A lot of crazy things happen. And of course, there's as these sort of fantasy novels go, you've got all these different characters that may or may not know each other, but at some point they all sort of realize that this big bad event or Dark Lord is coming, and they need to take care of the problem. And so you get the sort of the satisfaction of everybody now finally starting to work together at the end. I've always sort of liked that sort of scheme when it comes to big adventure novels. And of course, there is a big, deep, dark Cthulhian type entity that is the antagonist of the entire thing, the big evil danger that's about to happen. So if you get a chance, read it. It was the kind of thing where, for me, and this doesn't happen very often, but I get hooked into a book where I try to read on it when I get little windows of time in my life. Say, if my wife were driving the car and we were going to go to a town that's 15 minutes away, I'm going to read the next chapter or two. It's something that doesn't really happen that much with me, but this book did do that for me. So check it out. Six Gun Tarot. There's at least one other book which I read in the series, and I believe there's another one on the way. So I'll if anybody out there is better aware of what's going on, let me know, because I'd be very interested in reading the next book in the series. So, all right, there's some literature for you. Okay, this is the miniature from last week, and we got one contribution. This is from Even Steven, and he names this character JD a lot, and I think JD stands for drinks a lot, but this is what he writes. Only carries the bottle for attention and excuse for his erratic behavior. He has never drank one drop. Johnny was schizophrenic before modern-day Hollywood glamorized it. Truth is, Hollywood's portrayal of schizophrenics being heavy drinkers was derived from Johnny. As the story goes, Johnny became known as a drunk and a killer. Johnny never killed anyone. It was the voices in his head that did the deed. On to this episode's miniature. Check out this this lovely young beauty. This figure is a part of the Slice of Americana line from Blue Moon Manufacturing. So you've got a granny who really doesn't care about her parents anymore, and she's got a blunderbuss because that's what she's used to using. None of this newfangled technology by any stretch. So check it out. Come up with some ideas, and hopefully I'll see some good stuff that I can use in the comments section. So, oh, I forgot to turn her around. Let's do that. Got to see her from behind. She's got to do her twirl. Perfect. Yep. Take a look and tell me what you think.